I want to make. Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with a certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe. I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet next to me. I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way. Shut your mouth, you can save it. I'm the same dude that got his come up from the basement. 100 songs, 100 weeks, didn't change it. Experiments, development, intelligence, and patience. I'll do it all again, cause I never feel complacent. Let's keep the good vibes, positivity's contagious. I'm never looking back, cause I made a life that's passionate. A college graduate suppressing all his talents, yeah. He found a way to go and change, become an advocate. For taking control of your life, go out and battle. And you think you have a dream, then act on it. Get after it, get out your head and fucking capture it. You got one life to master it. Don't give up on your future. We all start losers. We're all late bloomers. Gotta struggle through the sewer. What you say? Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way.
Ancestry.com.
What is happening here? Why is everything sealed? How did they identify their suspect?
Well, actually, pretty often we can point at one person or an immediate family, a set of siblings. It just depends how much data you have to work with. However, it is only used as a tip. It should not be used for the basis of arrest or to compel DNA, which is what the prosecution's argument is they didn't use it as evidence to arrest him or to take this to trial.
To local law enforcement by the FBI was nothing more than a tip, a lead for local law enforcement to follow up on, should they choose to. They also want the tips, right? Again, for the same reason, they want the tips. The genealogical tip did not prove or substantiate the defendant's guilt. Rather, the tip allowed local law enforcement to focus their investigation on the defendant. I mean, if it helped them focus in on the defendant, that seems like it was pretty important to their investigation.
Right. If you look on Google, there's particular searches that you can do to see what queries are made. So if you go into Bryan Kohberger suspect or Bryan Kohberger wanted for a period of years going even beyond 2018, before 2018, and well before these murders, well before he was arrested, it's amazing. You see all these queries for those. Well, who would conduct those queries? But I would contend that person querying themselves, wanting to know if they're wanted, wanting to know if they are a suspect, or somebody that was thinking they could be a suspect or wanted.
Hey. An interesting development. We have confirmed that Bryan Kohberger's parents were called to testify in front of this investigative grand jury that has to do with this missing persons case. 45-year-old Dana Smithers, she went missing in June of 2022. Her body was just discovered about a month ago. We're told this is just an investigative grand jury, so it's not like they're trying to indict one specific person, but still, it's very, very interesting that they would subpoena and call in Bryan Kohberger's parents to come in and testify.
Jesse, what do you make of this?
So they're trying to determine if a crime was committed. I think that it should be important to note that Ms. Smithers disappeared in the same county where the parents lived. So one possibility could be, is it about Bryan Kohberger committing a crime only a few months before he's accused of committing quadruple homicide? Or could it be that these are just residents of that community and they have just some ancillary information regarding the disappearance of Ms. Smithers? That could very well be a possibility. And the Kohberger front, I do think it's interesting considering one of the big factors we've always wondered is if Bryan Kohberger really did this to those 4 college students in Idaho, was this his first time?
Of this case that are going to be surprising to most.
So there's bombshells that haven't dropped.
We are not done yet.
There may be some issues with the evidence that they're trying to attack on the defense side, and there may be some things that might be either embarrassing or inappropriate, or there's been some tampering, or there's a chain of custody issue. And what the defense is probably trying to do, now I haven't looked at the pleadings and I don't have access, but when the defense tries to unseal and say, no, we need to let the entire public see what happened, that's usually a situation in which the defense is trying to gain some ground by suggesting that maybe what the law enforcement and the police did in this case may have been inappropriate in some way. And that's really a lot of what I think is going on. It's my personal opinion. I don't have access to the pleadings. But you know why? Because they're sealed. They're sealed. Right. They're sealed. All right.
However, there is one more database that is vulnerable to law enforcement use, although their terms of service bar it. And that is a company called MyHeritage that is based in Israel. So that one has been used in some cases. And I suspect that may be one of the things that the prosecution would rather stay private. It's been ruled to not be illegal in other cases. It is against the terms of service, though, and it might look bad to the public. So they might be wanting to unseal that to get public opinion behind.
IgG is the big sexy thing now, and everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon. And I actually want to, maybe I'm the minority here, but I don't think it is in this case. I think it helped. I think it was I don't think it was the linchpin. I think they were onto this guy. Remember what's not said in this affidavit, which the police didn't know at this time, is they had already interviewed an eyewitness that saw the suspect leaving the house. They kept that really under wraps. They kept her description of this guy, and how tall he was, the bushy eyebrows, all of that was kept really under wraps for a good reason.
What we relied on, one of the witnesses saying things that absolutely couldn't be true. One of the things that the witness who said these things that couldn't be true also admitted she didn't really know anything. You can't rely on that anymore, so you take that out.
In these databases, and then you get, as a business owner, you wouldn't want that to happen either. You don't want people hesitant to put in. And so I think like it's a quiet, kind of tool they pull off the shelf that they can use, find the suspect and then put it back, and then not tell anybody, not that they don't tell anybody, they just don't want it like all that publicized because they don't want people pulling back from participating in that.
Yeah, the next show I want to do is
going to be 8:25. Can I have some, please? Hype train.
Can prove that the whole effort here, I believe, is not to win a trial, but it's to create a brand new constitutional right to a privacy protection under the U.S. Constitution for the GNA of third parties, including relatives. If you can argue that you somehow have a privacy interest in that, and you can therefore independently suppress that kind of evidence at a trial, then they've created a whole new area of constitutional law. That's where we're headed with these arguments. I don't expect an Idaho judge at the trial level to buy into that. I wouldn't expect the Idaho Supreme Court to find that to be valid, but it will be presented one day, I presume, should a conviction be had in this case, to the United States Supreme Court. That's where they want to head. This case is capable of conviction without the evidence, but that's the reason we're having such a fight about the knife sheet. It weakens the prosecution case if it's lost.
So you should find that the very first one lacked probable cause and then everything else does as well. But let me answer your question there. If the magistrate judge had been told there's unknown male B in blood in the house attached to the handrail, that might have made more of a difference to her. A sheath that can be carried to the house and blood in the house that's not the same, maybe that matters. And then maybe the car being completely empty of any blood DNA connection, maybe that matters a little bit more. Maybe
well, I'm just not sure why it matters for probable cause. But
what's the other explanation? What's going on with this investigation? What's happening here? That's exactly the point, Your Honor. What other explanation is there? The magistrate wasn't given a chance to ask that. She wasn't given a chance to ask that when she wasn't told about unknown male B, blood on the handrail. She wasn't given a chance to ask about that when she wasn't told about unknown male D, blood on a glove right outside the residence. She wasn't given a chance to ask any of those questions. She didn't know that Bryan's car, and the court's question, good question, what does that mean? Could it mean there's more than one person? The answer to that is, or it could mean it's not Bryan because his car's got nothing in it and there were only 13 minutes to do this.
Some of these are jury
The
arguments.
magistrate didn't get to know that.
Not
DNA is still on the knife sheet, though. That's the problem.
Not PC
for
arguments.
probable cause purposes.
If that's the only thing she's told, I can see why she'd find probable cause. It's these other things that are withheld that create a context around it. I think the purpose of Frank's is to ask this very question, and this is a question. What do we want to do with our criminal justice system? What we relied on, one of the witnesses saying things that absolutely couldn't be true. One of the things that the witness who said these things that couldn't be true also admitted she didn't really know anything. You can't rely on that anymore, so you take that out. You don't really even know how that happened, and you don't know how it got there. This isn't like DNA in blood on the wall from Mr. Kohberger. That's not there. That doesn't exist in this scene, especially when you know about the other male DNA in the house, and especially when you know about the lack of DNA connections. There's also no connection between the people in the house and Mr. Kohberger based on their cell phones, based on social media accounts. There's just no connection. The magistrate wasn't aware of all of those factors when she was being asked to decide on probable cause. I don't think criminal justice means one piece of evidence out of the context of everything else is all you need. Context matters a whole lot.
Well, you're not suggesting the magistrate was told that there was DNA evidence found in Mr. Kohberger's car or in his apartment. The lack of inclusion also can be viewed as the implied of, they're obviously not telling me they found this, they would have if they did.
I'm not 100% sure I followed. That search was done by making a profile in Othram Lab. That search did not lead anywhere. The FBI took over the search. That entire segment of this case is secret. We have been through several motions to compel to try to get information, and we've gotten very, very little information. The court should know that we learned today about policies and procedures of Othram that we have not been able to take a look at. Those have not been produced. In fact, we've been told they don't exist. Learned about investigative work that was done after Othram had done the work that they could do and before the FBI took over, that we learned about for the first time this week. Not through the motion to compel process. This was a giant secret. When we get to the FBI, we don't know who did the work. You heard that any...
What is happening here?
When she says this witness or victim said she heard the person go down the stairs, up the stairs, and back down the stairs, or was it vice versa? Either way, that's a big piece to Ancestry.com. So if he had...
What is happening here? Why is everything sealed?
When she says this witness or victim said she heard the person go down the stairs, up the stairs, and back down the stairs, or was it vice versa? Either way, that's a big piece to leave out, and it didn't fit their narrative, and they were creating a narrative based on just different statements that probably both witnesses were given, but they did focus a lot on Bethany because of that affidavit. She didn't want to come back. They had to subpoena her. I believe a lawyer actually did end up going to Las Vegas, and they did it there. I have that record somewhere, but I'm sure other people have seen it. So it's just really interesting to me, this whole point, and I wonder what you guys think. Who's running up and down the steps? Does it mean anything? Do either of these girls remember anything?
Because that's misleading to the judge. That waters down what was said. And that matters in the probable cause affidavit, because the officers, when they wrote this, knew that wasn't the case. They knew this particular person that DM said was upright and running down the stairs, that's not what happened. That person was killed in the bed and never left the bed. And so the officers water that down because they know that fact is wrong, but they don't tell the magistrate that.
Okay, so my theory was wrong because she's talking about DM, but DM says someone's upright running down the steps. So that's wild. And either way, it sounds like they're both making statements that are contradictory, that aren't fitting into a perfectly formed narrative. And that's why I think, this is not considered a valid part of the PCA, and that's what she's arguing. I don't know if she'll win, but this is a good argument, and I think it's something that could be decided here. She doesn't want the witness testimony to come in, and the witnesses don't want to come and give their testimony because it sounds like they don't really know anything. Maybe they were just out of their minds, drunk or high. I don't know. Who knows what happened, but it does sound like that was left out.
They also don't tell the magistrate that this witness has claimed memory problems, that this witness has claimed that she's not sure what she heard or saw was real or whether it was at a dream, and that is contained in defendant's 8C, and that's going to be beginning at page 396, 398 in that police interview that said that she had too much to drink and couldn't remember. None of that is given to the magistrate. That is information that's withheld. That's credibility of the person telling law enforcement these things, and the magistrate had a right to know that whatever is laid out in here isn't exactly the way it was. That person had credibility issues, and she said things that were just absolutely untrue and couldn't have been true.
I think the argument she's making here is a little less credible because this goes to the credibility of the witness, and this is something you can argue at trial. Now, if they had a preliminary hearing, she would have been able to do that, but in terms of it not being allowed to be on the probable cause, it makes it, the drunken and those kind of things are different. The conflicting and contradictory statements, though, I think is an issue, and it does show deception on the part of law enforcement. I just don't know if this judge is going to kick that out based on that. And I'm not a lawyer, so this is all my, supposition. But I would say that, Anne is working hard at getting a lot of this thrown out, and I'm curious what you guys all think about it.
Law enforcement knew that. That was intentionally withheld from the magistrate. That matters when we're talking about credibility and sets this whole thing into motion. What they have determined to be suspect vehicle number one. And it trails a path of pieced together cameras. But what they don't tell the magistrate is that the camera near the residence, the 1112 King Road camera near 1122 King Road, you can't tell what kind of car it is. They don't tell the magistrate that that's an impossible car, that their expert can't make an identification off that. They don't tell the magistrate that this is pieced together from various other videos throughout the area. That's withheld from the magistrate. That's important information when you tell a magistrate, we found this car doing this thing and we know what it is. It's around this particular area. The next issue is the year of the car. Law enforcement works with the FBI to determine the year of the car, and the FBI provides some possibilities after numerous submissions to them, and the court knows this and can read about this. This is going to be in D10. That's in D9. And finally, after several submissions, that's when the FBI IML says, I can make a car identification. The issue with that's not disclosed to the magistrate is that car appears one time on one video and not any of the others that they try to say are the path. It's not, let me see if I can say this right. It's not following a consistent trail where the one camera that can identify the car where it appears again. It appears one time. And then what law enforcement did was they took several videos from all over the area and said, well, it's the same car and we have an identification. That's not all. The identification was most comfortably from that FBI agent to be a 2011 to 2013 Elantra. And that's what law enforcement relied on. The court it is D12, and it's the Be on the Lookout that was issued by Moscow Police Department, where they look for a 2011 to 13 Hyundai Elantra. And that's what they're looking for. And they don't tell the magistrate.
So a lot of what she's talking about is things that we have all had doubt about to begin with. And, a preliminary hearing would have settled all of this. I'm beginning to think that Frank's motions are the remedy for lack of preliminary hearings when you need to attack the PCA. This could have all been done in a preliminary hearing. All this time has been wasted because they had to do a secret grand jury. And that's why I think secret grand juries are complete and utter BS. Can they just abolish these things? She has a really good point here. None of the things in the PCA are really straightforward. And you can tell that law enforcement found the IGG from the tip and then created a narrative to support it. This is the definition of confirmation bias. This is so unjust. And whether he's guilty or innocent, they didn't do the work the way that they should have. They could have ultimately gotten to him if he's guilty, but they were too trigger happy. and they just went and did it.
I guess the remaining warrants or the questions raised by the defense about the remaining warrants. I'd like to start first with the warrants for the residents in Pennsylvania. That expands into Mr. Kohberger's person under the Pennsylvania search warrants for his person, for his car, which was in Pennsylvania. And then the defense also raises questions about statements made by Mr. Kohberger to law enforcement. First, as to 119 Lambston itself, one of the first things the defendant offers to the court is claims there was no local warrant, valid local warrant, and that simply isn't true. As the record clearly demonstrates, there were 3 valid local warrants, Pennsylvania warrants, for the residence, for the defendant's person, and for his car. The defendant then asserts, and I appreciate Mr. Logston's clarifications, but essentially the defendant asserts there needs to be a separate special warrant in order for Pennsylvania to take the defendant into custody as a fugitive from Idaho on our charges. And as we cited in our briefing on this, the statutes in Pennsylvania and Idaho are virtually the same, and they clearly contemplate that a felony fugitive can be taken into custody without a fugitive warrant under the circumstances that exist in this particular case. Now, if the issue is...
I have a question. Do you have to know that you've committed a crime to be considered a fugitive? Do you have to have a bolo out on you to be considered a fugitive? Did he have a bolo out on him? How is he considered a fugitive? This has been bothering me from the beginning. I'm sure there's a simple legal answer to this, but if anybody knows it, please let me know. And what Bill's about to say going forward is also very interesting about incriminating evidence, and just have a listen and tell me what you think. I just found this really interesting.
The law enforcement presence or access to the defendant inside his parents' residence, we would submit that's already addressed because Pennsylvania State Police had a valid search warrant for the premises, for the defendant's person, and for his car. So they had lawful process to be where they were, where they found the defendant and took him into custody.
Right, if you can search the house for a person, you can go into the house and...
The knock and announce, there was discussion earlier today on the explanation of what happened with the dynamics of the knock and announce. That's detailed in Sergeant Lang's statement, which now has a current cover affidavit to it filed with the court. That's S5. I'm not going to publicly go through all the factors unless the court wishes me to, because they are quite incriminating as far as the applicable factors that justify either an abbreviated knock and announce or, frankly, elimination of knock and announce entirely.
What does that mean? Elimination of knock and announce entirely? Would that be a more drastic measure? Like a sniper? I'm just, can someone explain what he means there? And also, what the heck was going on inside of that house? He's implying shit was going down inside of the house that they needed to bust in that way.
And from what we have before the court now, it's clear that the Pennsylvania police were operating in a dynamic sense, reacting to real-time information that was coming in. That's all documented in various reports and log sheets that have been submitted with our pleadings, which are not particularly lengthy in nature. Finally, as to the defendant's statements, I think the key notion here on any statements the defendant made, and frankly, he really didn't make much in the way of incriminating statements, is there was never any interrogation. He was Mirandized eventually, but even the prior conversations that occurred with Pennsylvania law enforcement, there was never an interrogation.
Okay, even my cat is perturbed over this. I mean, is there an interview or is there not an interview? You know, we just assumed this whole time there was no interview, right? That's what I assumed forever. Bill just confirms it, right? There was no interview. He wasn't Mirandized at any point. He didn't make any statements, right? Okay, fine. So there's no interview. Okay, but what is this? What exactly is this then? Can anybody explain this part?
The state has provided recordings of MPD Detective Payne's interview with Mr. Kohberger to the defense.
When she says this witness or victim said she heard the Ancestry.com. So if he had, it would be a more clear-cut issue. So this is the argument. I upload Ancestry.com. So, or Ancestry.com. So if he had, it would be a more clear-cut issue. So this is the argument. I upload my DNA into, say, Ancestry.com. There are options on some of these genealogy databases to allow them to use your DNA for research purposes or allow law enforcement to use them for cold cases. You can opt in or opt out in some of these databases. Let's say I upload my DNA and I opt out. I do not want them to use my DNA for research or law enforcement purposes. So that happens. And then a crime is committed and DNA is found on a sheath and they pull that DNA. Well, if my DNA is uploaded, they could automatically match it to me, and they would. The problem is that I have opted out, okay? And that would be a stronger argument because it's my DNA and I elected to opt out of that DNA to be utilized for any of these purposes. That's why the judge specifically asks her, he says, you're not arguing that Mr. Kohberger's DNA was uploaded into any of these databases, are you? Meaning prior. And she just says she doesn't understand the question. And she might have been playing dumb, or maybe that's true. But he's basically making a fine point on this, that Bryan Kohberger's Fourth Amendment rights were not violated because it was not his DNA that was matched in this database illegally or against FBI policy or against the genealogy database policy. So that's an important thing to understand. So then the next step is, okay, they didn't use his DNA because it wasn't in the database, but they utilized relatives of his that had uploaded DNA to the database. And he doesn't have a Fourth Amendment protection for his relatives. It's their right. So if they came forward and decided to sue the company or make some sort of statement about this, that could create a bigger problem. But as it is, nobody has Fourth Amendment rights over their relatives, right? We can't get protection because our relatives' DNA is in a database. One of the detectives that I was listening to likened it to this, and you can agree or disagree with it, but it is an argument. If you were to go onto, say, Facebook or Instagram, and investigators do this, they try to make connections between people based on their social media. And you were to do that, and you were to find connections with a suspect and a group of people. And then you found that group of people's names and things like that, and you were able to develop a theory about your suspect based on their associations. That's allowed because all of this information is being publicly posted on social media, and we're all aware at this point of the disclaimers all over Facebook or whatever you want to call it. And so, it's very similar argument in that regard. Where I think it's more of an issue though is because now we're talking about somebody's biological data, their DNA. This is like the most private of private things. Now, Anne tries to make an argument that this could be a HIPAA violation, and it's a fair argument, but it's not a great one, and I don't think this judge is going to determine it.
Work going into databases they shouldn't have been going into, violating their own policy, keeping no records, and doing this all behind the scenes in secret. That's the only way a name was produced. Prior to that time, the lead detective in the case had not heard the name Bryan Kohberger. He had not crossed their radar. That's nowhere in the affidavit, and that's important because that's intentionally withheld from the affidavit because of the work the FBI did, because the FBI went behind the scenes and did things that they shouldn't have been doing, because they searched databases that they shouldn't have been doing. We don't know what else they did wrong because everything else is a secret. We don't know what else they did wrong because there's no record kept. There's no process kept. We can't rebuild the process that they did to identify Mr. Kohberger. We can't do any of that because they kept no records, produced no records, and did this all behind closed doors, and it was withheld from the magistrate. Had the judge heard about that, signing probable cause.
So using the prior example, if they gathered information and tried to firm up a suspect based on photo connections and social media connections, right, that they were able to access publicly, then they would be able to show their work. These are the connections we made. Here's the diagram. They could do that in this case as well, but they don't want to. And the records were destroyed because the method in which they did it is not really a legally defined area just yet. The law is not settled. So this is new law that's being argued right here. And we'll have more and more of this as technology continues to rapidly develop. And that's really what the issue is. Does Bryan Kohberger, like that man said earlier, have a Fourth Amendment privacy and protection right against his relatives' records being used? And really, do any of us have that Fourth Amendment right? And it needs to be defined more clearly, and it's not going to be easy. So I do think this will end up in the Supreme Court if he's found guilty, which he probably will be, unfortunately. But who knows? We still haven't heard all of the facts. But really, that's what the argument is. This next part is really interesting. Have a listen. This, I believe, is Bethany's exculpatory evidence. And Anne gives us that hint, as she does throughout these proceedings, when she says, this witness saw something and heard something. It's the same language used in that affidavit that the PI used, stating that it's in fact, I believe it's the same words, where the witness saw something and heard something that can be exculpatory to Bryan Kohberger. And so I think, listen and tell me what you guys think, but I think this is where she's specifically talking about Bethany's exculpatory evidence.
This probable cause affidavit talks about an interview they had where the person that was interviewed said that she heard things and saw things within her house. But what is written in the probable cause affidavit is seriously lacking in detail. It's wrong and it's false in many places. The affidavit reads, it says, this person stated she went to sleep on the second floor. She was awoken at 4 by what she stated sounded like one of the victims playing with the dog, which was on the 3rd floor. A short time later, she thought she heard one of the victims say something. That caveat, she thought she heard, is a problem. That's not at all what was said. This person was interviewed shortly after 911 was called in the afternoon of November 13th, 2022. And she was sure, I'm at Defendant's Exhibit 8A, page 281, lines 4 through 10, when this witness was sure that she heard this particular victim go up the stairs, and then come running back down the stairs.
So I'm aware that she says this particular victim went to bed on the 2nd floor and Bethany's room was on the bottom floor. And so that could, I could be wrong about this theory, but she also says that these things are false and not true. And so this whole issue about where they were sleeping and for how long has been a question since the beginning. In fact, in the very beginning, we were told they were both asleep on the bottom floor. And after Lana Oriani from Truth and Transparency got discovery, we were able to figure out that that's not true. And then, in the probable cause affidavit, they stated that Bethany was on the bottom floor and Dylan was on the 2nd floor. But then if you look at the PCA again, there's also some wording that's questionable, in which they say when the victim returned to her room. And so, or some wording like that, which implies that she was elsewhere when some of this stuff was happening. And so I think Anne is sort of pointing this out. And she's also pointing out that this is exculpatory to Bryan Kohberger because this witness is stating things that are simply provably false and not true. And therefore, the witness statement should be thrown out. What do you guys think about that?
That is not what's contained in this affidavit at all. When this witness was sure that she heard this particular victim go up the stairs, and then come running back down the stairs. That is not what's contained in this affidavit at all. That is repeated during this same interview a couple of different times at page 287. It's also repeated in a subsequent interview that same day. This is Defendant's Exhibit 8B. That's at page 313, and again at 320.
She spends a lot of time here on this, and this is why I think she's referencing Bethany, because this actually is a really important piece of information. It wasn't just on one interview that this person made contradictory statements. It was on several. And the other thing that's really interesting, and I'm just trying to figure out, or Ancestry.com. There was no interview. He wasn't Mirandized at any point. He didn't make any statements, right? Okay, fine. So there's no interview. Okay, but what is this? What exactly is this then? Can anybody explain this part?
The state has provided recordings of MPD Detective Payne's interview with Mr. Kohberger to the defense. Ding, ding, ding. There's another confirmation that there is an interview with Mr. Kohberger with the Moscow Police Department, Detective Payne. Now, what's in that? I don't know. Will we ever see that? I don't know. Do you remember it being referenced at all in any other documents about what Kohberger actually said? I did not. And that's part of the gag order.
What that's based on. And I would encourage both sides to over disclose those opinions in caution rather than under disclose.
You know, a lot of people have talked about this judge, that he's bought and paid for, that he's biased. I don't see any of that, to be honest with you. This next little talk that he gives is for both defense and prosecution, but it's the prosecution that's irritating him the most, that he addresses it to initially. And I genuinely believe this judge wants to just follow the law. He's not interested in any of the drama or the backstory. He said from the beginning he didn't want to do this trial. So in terms of the IGG, he already knows he's not the one that's going to decide this. This is something to be decided by a higher court. That's something that's just going to happen. I don't believe that they're going to be able to throw that IGG out. And so this judge, I think, is actually very, very fair, much more knowledgeable than John Judge, and more honest, or as honest as he can be. This is just my opinion. Everybody is going to have their own, and feel free to disagree with me. I am not going to be upset about it. I may change my mind, but at this point, I really like this judge.
Because two things. One, you may find yourself in a bad position if you're not allowed to go into an opinion you felt you were going to be allowed to go to because it's not disclosed. And two, I don't want to spend half our day at trial with me saying, where's that disclosed at? And then chasing the jury out while you dig through your thousands of pages trying to find where that is. And so the more exhaustive your disclosures,
y'all get it together,
the less likely it is it's going to draw that objection, and the less time that we're going to waste at trial trying to find where you disclose that. And so I think sometimes, and I'm not saying you did that in this case, I think sometimes lawyers view this expert disclosure requirement as sort of tedious work that they need to get done in order to comply with the timeline, a requirement of the court, and then they sort of move on from it and forget about it. It's a dangerous tact to take. It is, for the case, one of the most important things that you can do is to understand what the person is going to testify to, and give a disclosure of what they're going to testify to, what those opinions are, and to be looking at that as you're thinking about their testimony, as you should be doing certainly now, even though it's months away from trial, I mean, on a continuing basis.
It's going to be here fast.
So I would really stress the importance of that in a case, particularly of this import.
Do more, not less.
You know, and so don't feel like your job is done at this point, because I would suggest to you it's not. That you may consider needing to do some cleaning up and making sure things are more fulsome in the scope of those disclosures and what you're doing. The other thing, you know, I think you tried to do to a degree is you thought, well, we think this is fact testimony, but, you know, in an abundance of caution, we're going to put it in an expert disclosure. Well, if you're going to put it in an expert disclosure because in an abundance of caution it could be viewed that way, I suggest you treat it that way
with
in terms of what you give.
10-4, sir. Go sit down. That's what the defense wanted.
Okay, so with all that said, he basically wants the case laid out for him, and their experts need to give detailed analyses as to what they're going to be arguing. It's the whole case, right? It's the whole case, and he wants it from both sides. So, I mean, we could potentially have a lot of answers very soon and know a ton more. The only issue is, like everything else in this case, it gets sealed. Are they going to request that this information be sealed? And that would just be absolutely ridiculous to do that, but it doesn't mean they won't do it. But if they have to hand this stuff in and it's not sealed, we are going to have a lot of information and know a lot more about what this case really entails. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm really curious what you guys think. Like I said, not an attorney, just my opinions based on watching tons of LawTube and tons of information on this case. So hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll be back for a lost footage episode. There was no Okay, can you guys hear me now? Okay. Can you hear me? What the hell's going on? Oh, wait, Social Glow just said they can hear me. Can a couple more people say yes if you can hear me? Can anybody hear me? Hello? I was just talking to myself that whole time. Okay, thank you, Toes. I appreciate it. Okay, so I was like saying a bunch of stuff to myself for like 4 minutes, and you guys are so awesome that you were just chatting and doing your thing. So anyway, what I wanted to thank you guys. Thanks, Tinsel. Thanks, Toes. Thanks, Yvonne. I appreciate it. So here, I have a couple things, right? Here's the thing. We all have different things that we took away from these two hearings, and there's still a lot that I think if I listen to a few more times, like I'm sure a lot of people are going to do, we're going to pick up on some nuances and piece things together. It's like, I just calling it letting my subconscious settle. I take all this information in and I let it settle, and then you start to make these crazy connections. But what I wanted to say was earlier I was talking to Leslie, who is my moderator, and she was like, who is male? Like, where's C? Where's male C DNA? And I'm like, what are you talking about? They just said B and D. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah, that's true. Right. So we have unknown male B, whose bloody handprint or whatever hand stuff was on the rail. And then we have unknown male D, who was on the glove outside. Okay. Probably not the one that detective, the YouTube detective, found. But regardless, so that means there's a C, right? There's a B and a C and a D. But then, Leslie, did you think about this? Who's male? Who's A? Who's A then? Because if there's a B and a C and a D, then there's got to be an A. Did you think about that one? Ooh, did I just touche over here? You guys going to touche with me? What do you guys think? I know I'm not the only person who thought this. No, Leslie helped me out with that, with the C thing. It's interesting. Does that make sense? Or do they just do every other letter? They have some weird random code, right? So we could assume there's 4 DNA samples they got, or no, 5, because we've got Bryan Kohberger, right? Then we have B and D, which are unknown male DNAs, which means A and C are known, right? Does that mean A and C are known? I wonder what it means. I really do. We also know that Bryan Kohberger partial DNA was on the strap, the snap, right? But you know, he nothing in blood though, and there's no blood on the sheath. Anne says, let's see. No, it's not, it wouldn't. So okay, let me just, no, I'm not saying that there are 4 unidentified DNA, but when Leslie said, what about C? Okay, that's a great deduction. So B, C, and D. And then I thought, what about A, right? So that would make it 4 if we want to just use logic, right? And so it would make it 4. Is that true? I have no idea. We're just spitballing here. And so A and C are no longer unknown. And then B and D continue to be unknown. Now, Bryan Kohberger could be A or C, or they could be people that they didn't get a hit on. I mean, I don't know. I would assume A and C are known now, whatever they are. That's kind of interesting question, right? So I was saying hi to everybody too, guys. Sorry, I haven't been in the chat here, but I appreciate everybody coming in and talking about it. What was the craziest thing you guys learned from the hearings? What struck you the most from the hearings? One of the things that I feel more certain about now, and this has to do with watching the hearings, talking to Leslie, and then listening to Pavarotti, and that DNA that they're saying was planted, right? I never believed that they went and swabbed. I'm sure a lot of people saw the TikTok thing where basically, you know, they show this cop get out of a car, take a Q-tip and swab like a door handle, right? And the implication is it's like that's how they got Bryan Kohberger's DNA, right? And like, sure, fair enough, that maybe that can happen. But when you swab the door, say you swab a door handle or something where a person lives, and you're trying to plant DNA. So you have to, like, what if there's other DNA mixed in there? Like, how do you know you're just getting his DNA? I guess you could do it with a glass, right? If you took a sip out of a glass, but like, just thinking, like, genuinely, how do you plant DNA unless you have it isolated and known, and then you go and swab it? I mean, just practically speaking, like, I'm sure it happens. Is it easier than I'm thinking? I don't know, but that's for one. So the planted part, I think means something different now, and I might just be slow in catching on to this, but what I think makes the most sense now is that there was only a partial of that DNA, right? I think that's just a fact that it's only partial DNA. But does that mean like they didn't have all of the chromosomes on there, or not the chromosomes, the gosh, I'm blanking on it. But in other words, they don't have a full presentation or accurate presentation of this person's DNA. It's kind of like a bootleg version of their DNA. And so if that's the case, so they run it through CODIS. We know he hasn't committed any other crime, so it doesn't show up. I'm not counting his sister's phone. And then we run it through, so there's nothing on CODIS, right? So now, you know, we're gonna go and see if we can get the FBI to do what they usually do behind the scenes. Nobody knows. And then they upload it into a genetic genealogy thing, right? And they still don't get anything because it's partial. They don't have a full DNA printout for him. So then does that give some like potential hits? And then they end up building out the other portion of his DNA based on some calculations that I have no idea that they might even exist. And is that why the SNP profile was that much larger when it returned than when it went? Because it doubled in size because, or I don't know, maybe a third more. And so maybe it was 70% DNA and it wasn't 100 and they created the other 30%. I mean, that would be considered planting evidence, but not in the literal sense. And that actually is very plausible and also very terrifying, right? Also very terrifying. Everybody keeps talking about the IgG in this case. People are like, oh, without the IgG, it's a slam dunk. The IgG has nothing to do with it. Or there are people like us who are like, the IgG has everything to do with it. And without the IgG, they don't have a case. I'm firmly in the camp that the IgG has everything to do with this, the way that they developed that. And then that just leads me to the suspicion I've had for a long time and why I went into Bryan Kohberger's family tree and dissected it. And no, Pop, I don't think that's his grandmother. I think they're both passed on now. Sadly, I know all of his that's how well I know Bryan Kohberger's family history. Okay. So I didn't see any of his family or extended family members sitting in the jury box today. I'm just being honest. I know there's other people out there like me that know this much, that know too much about somebody else's family history. But the point I'm trying to make is that it leads back to one of those nagging suspicions that I've had in this case for a long time, which is that a distant cousin of his? Is that an unknown sibling of his? You know? And that's why the match was there. And then the other question, right? Because it's really fascinating to think about. But then the other question is the DNA, right? I was mistaken. I thought that Anne clarified that they don't, that Bryan did not. The judge challenges her, and that was kind of what I was talking about before. Like, are you saying that the Bryan Kohberger's DNA was uploaded into one of these places? And I guess I didn't remember this, but apparently what happened was, the answer is they don't know, right? They don't know. In other words, maybe he's not saying, and they're not possible. Maybe he is saying, and he did upload it to GEDmatch or Ancestry 23andMe. If he did that, that's definitely a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. The thing about that, though, is they wouldn't need, if that were the case, they wouldn't need to build out a DNA profile because they already had it, This thing could have you talking in circles for days. It's crazy. Let me look at the comments. So let's see. Tell it to Elle. What's up, girl? Eric Pascal. Hello. Daryl, thanks for being here. Thanks for being here, guys. Yeah, this is like wild. And this is just 2 hearings. I mean, imagine every day of trial. Wow. Does anybody else have a PhD in Bryanology yet? Does anybody else have a PhD in that? Or Idaho 4ology? That's the next thing we do. We're going to have a convention, guys, just for Idaho 4 nutbags. And then we're going to create a degree. We're going to create a degree in this surrounding this case. I mean, this case is insane. It's absolutely insane. Delphi is crazy too. I mean, Delphi is off the rails crazy. It's so crazy to see such blatant corruption, and yet it just continues. Like, there's no stopping it. Like, no one, I mean, I guess you got to let it play out, right? But like, I don't know if you guys follow Delphi, but that's a whole, wow, that's a Pandora's box. It really truly is. It's incredible. Yeah, it did match his dad, but it matched his dad. No, wait. No, let me step back. No, it didn't match his dad. They got the first DNA that they got was his father's. It was his father's DNA. They didn't get his DNA when they tested for it. They probably got his mother's too. For all we know, he got the neighbor's DNA. They got everybody's DNA, but they didn't get Bryan's. All right. So they got his father's, and then his father's is uploaded into these systems, and there's no match. That's right, actually. Oh my God, I completely forgot about that piece. Is his father's Fourth Amendment right? Well, it's not. Bryan couldn't argue that is his father's. He has rights to privacy and protection over his father's DNA. But like I said before, Mr. Kohberger could, in that sense, argue it. But I'm not sure. I mean, he could say that he was brought, his name and likeness was brought into the psyche, the masses of the psyche, or the psyches of the masses, and through no fault of his own, right? But that's actually another important piece there. See, Leslie always making me think, bringing something up and always making me think, because it was his father's, it wasn't his. See, and that just totally unraveled everything, because they never had his until they got the buccal swab, and they created the other one. They created the other one. This is crazy. Well, I don't think it was his father, and I know that's not what you're implying. It's not, but I mean, another relative. I still go with the theory that I think it could be another relative of his. I mean, his one aunt studied forensics, remember? And also, I believe, went to WSU, and maybe is settled in that area. Maybe not living in Idaho, maybe in Nevada, but like out west in that area. Does she have any kids? I know of the cousins. I know what the cousins look like. And I know what his uncle looked like when he was much younger. It looked like a spitting image of Bryan. It's insane. So I don't know, guys. What do you guys think? Okay, it says, look what Yvonne said. All right, let me see. Didn't BK spend the summer with a cousin in Indiana? After that, he came back home vegan. I don't know. The interesting thing about that is Brannon, that guy Brannon, who kind of looks like he could be BK in the future. He's from Indiana. I couldn't find any familial connections to tie Brannon with Kohberger's family on mom or dad's side, but men have babies that other people, that they don't record in obituaries, in other words. So it's hard to know. But regardless, I did not know he spent the summer in Indiana. As far as when he became vegan, I thought he became vegan because of his visual snow, but I have no idea. Maybe you're right. That's when he became vegan. But I do know that people with visual snow are told to follow like very specific diets and stuff to see if it helps. So, but I don't know. I genuinely don't know, but that's still interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Let's see. If DNA on sheath stands Bryan is in a boatload of trouble unless Anne can explain it away. I believe a jury will be sold. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that, Daryl. I mean, I might not personally be sold based on the DNA, but most juries, I agree 100% are going to be sold on that. I mean, look at how they convicted Richard Allen, right? I mean, Richard Allen, the big piece for the jury was something that was a last minute pull by the prosecution, this white van. I mean, that's insane to me. The things that people might focus on, that just tells me they had a strong personality in there and everybody followed their lead, honestly, because it's not logical for that to be the reason. DNA, though, you can easily put somebody away and sleep at night thinking you got the right person. That's the messed up part. So it's too complex. Nobody's going to want to sit there and pontificate about how like they built up another, the rest of the DNA profile with some crazy genetic stuff. Nobody's going to do, 12 jurors aren't going to do that, So they really railroaded him here. They really, truly did. And it just reminds me of that book, The Trial, from Franz Kafka. If you've never read it, you should. It's terrifying, right? And it can happen, and it does happen to lots of people every day. We're just focusing on this particular case because it's such a shit show. But even in the more mundane cases, they convict people on things that I don't think they should. They get probable cause, and then they're indicted, and these people get locked up and thrown away, and they're innocent. I'm not saying everybody that gets convicted is innocent, so don't get it twisted. But you can look up the stats yourself, and they're real. And even if, we're not perfect, and I agree, more than one is more than enough, but we need to do better. And then you add the death penalty in there, forget about it. I would never be able to convict somebody death penalty. I don't care what they did. You're not going to get me to do it. Not going to happen, because too many times down the road, people have been exonerated. And also my word is not going to put anybody else to death. I refuse to be like, you're like weaponizing me. Okay. The state is weaponizing jurors to do that. I'm not doing that. You can go fuck yourself. Sorry. I feel very strongly about the death penalty. So it's just one of those things. And I know not everybody feels that way. Regardless, what else? So we had B and D, which makes us wonder if there's A and C. And then we have the witnesses just saying all kinds of crazy stuff, right? All kinds of crazy stuff. Like somebody's running up and down the steps now. Now somebody's running up and down the steps. She gave us the time frame for it too. Not that it matters, because it sounds like neither of these witnesses could give you a straight story. That she heard the dog bark, somebody come down the steps, somebody run up the steps, and then somebody come back down the steps again. That's interesting, right? But then she also said, either Dylan or Bethany, that they felt like they couldn't tell if it was a dream or not. They didn't know what was going on. Were they drugged? Were these two girls drugged? Did they give them a little Versed in their vodka that night? I mean, this is a real question. Now, you don't need to be drugged to have some sort of psychosis if you see your best friends or your friends being mass murdered, right? Like, I think it'd be pretty easy to fall into some type of acute mental illness. So I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about. Yeah. So yeah, I included that clip. I'm wondering if you're talking about when they arrested him. I included that clip because, as much as we're focused on the defense and people don't want to like Bill Thompson and stuff, like you can still find stuff out on their side too. And I'm sure other people have gone over more of it, but I mean, Bill Thompson said, they did this, they arrested him this way based on their surveillance of him. And, he's not going to say it there because it could be incriminated. Now, is he just blowing smoke up our ass? Sure, it's possible, right? but I think he's probably somewhat telling the truth. I mean, even the defense, a lot of the stuff they were arguing was really just for the public to hear. And I think that was why the judge just had his hand on his head on his hand. Because like a lot of it was either for jury or just to get some like unsealed stuff out, like when she was talking about the credibility of the witnesses. Now we know a lot more. We also know that it sounds like they don't really have a straight story. And all they did was pick out their pieces of the story, probably tied them together. And then, you know, with confirmation bias, got bushy eyebrows and they were good to go. They were ready to rock. They were like, we busted this. That's when Detective Payne called up the Gonsalves family and said, hey, look, I got a great ID here. She saw his bushy eyebrows. It's case closed. It's case closed. Okay. Once we got the bushy eyebrows in place and the Honda that we have one photo of, that we were able to connect all the other neighborhood cameras to this white car traveling in this really bizarre way, then it was all over. Case closed for Kohberger. We got the bushy eyebrows, the disjointed timeline of the white car. Oh yeah, and then we got this cell tower dump. And you know, when somebody's phone isn't on network, that just means, you know, Detective Payne decides to let us know. Well, usually criminals they're known to, you know, his whole logic, criminals are known to turn off their phones or when they're ready to commit a crime. Get the fuck out of here. Okay, stop it. Just stop it, Payne. Like, first of all, that's not an argument to assume that Bryan Kohberger turned his off, because you don't have any proof, right? And I'm sorry, but I mean, again, the little things that can happen in your life that can end up causing you a headache later. What if you don't have a kind of phone that can be tracked? You just use it once in a while. What if your phone battery legit died, like that one rumor on 4chan where they said Brian's phone died because he was in the car with Brent and they were doing lines and whatever. And that's why, because Brent was charging his phone, right? Like, what happens then, right? You're a nice guy and you let your friend, we've all had our phones die, right? So, you know, it doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. And even, you know, with his cell phone touching a tower, that doesn't mean a whole lot to me either. Look, it can be incriminating, sure, but it's not incriminating enough on its own. They don't have that many towers in that town to begin with. He's got to touch one of them. It's not like they're in New York City, right? And you've got hundreds of towers that you can connect to and buildings and offices and shit. And it was this one specific spot. That would be hard to argue. But when you live out in the boondocks and like you have like 3 towers in this 100-mile radius or 60-mile, whatever it is, you get my point. It's everybody's attached to that right now, dude. Like everybody is attached to that tower right now. Stop it. Like, it's not that incriminating, right? It's just really not. But they had to make it work. Imagine you're told this is your suspect, now make it work. That's basically what happened here. And it's all because of this built out IgG. And that's how they got him. And I think that's a big part of the sealing in this case. Now, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think. All the rumors and stuff, I'm trying to separate them out now from like what we actually know, what's just known. I mean, I've tried to do that throughout the case, but it's hard because it's easy to get caught in some rabbit hole where you start doing your own confirmation biases and think you have it all figured out. In reality, you're just like super imaginative and creative, which is what I am, but I'm trying to use my logical mind here more to look at this. I don't know if he's guilty or innocent, but I do know this looks a lot like the Delphi pre-trial hearings now, although the judge is not that judge. I mean, this judge is fair. Like I said, I think he's fair. I think he's not about the bullshit, and he's going to just go with the law. And when the things he can't rule on, which is the IgG admissibility, we still don't know, though. They need to know if it's from Bryan or not, first of all. Like, they need to know if Bryan would know if he uploaded his DNA into GEDmatch, because that's something you have to put it in. It's different than like getting it tested from, say, 23andMe or Ancestry. So he would know that, and that means the lawyers know that, but the state hasn't told them yet. You know, there's, again, the rumor, Bryan said he told somebody in his nearby building that he had his DNA checked recently because he wanted to know if he was Italian or not, right? Or he thinks he's Italian, which he is Italian. He does have Italian heritage. So, but imagine, like, the state still doesn't even know what person, like, was it the father that was uploaded into the genetic genealogy? I'm just so confused by this. Like, this is when I have to go back over and do bullet points again with like exactly how it happened. It's so convoluted. And this is the thing too, that I feel, you guys tell me what you think, just based on my experiences, when things are this complicated to connect, it means that it's reverse engineered, because it shouldn't be this hard to make these fucking connections. It should be like, boom, like they got the DNA, they uploaded it, boom. And he was a match. And so, you know, then we matched it to his buccal swab, which matched to the snap. Like, if this case would be a lot more of a slam dunk if they took DNA off the snap, they uploaded it, and it hit Bryan Kohberger's name, right? They'd be done. End of story. People might not like it. They'd still try to hide it because they're using these databases. It would be a problem, but like, it'd be a lot harder to argue this without that, or if it were that case. But that's not the case. They got a partial on the DNA. They couldn't match it to anybody. They sent it to this lab. They didn't get anything. They sent it to another lab. They didn't get anything. Then they sent it back to this lab. And then they end up following Bryan Kohberger. Look, people can say that it's not the case that they were following them, but I don't believe in coincidences in a case like this. And I think they were followed, and I think they were following him for a while. So regardless, then they wait till he leaves to go to another state, right? And then they stake him out for days watching his routine. And then ultimately they take DNA from his garbage, and who knows whose DNA was on there. It's a garbage can, for God's sake. And they still don't get his DNA, which is hilarious. And then they get his father's DNA. I mean, what? This case is, there's no logical flow to it. I'm sure if you put it all down on paper, it makes sense. But it's not natural. This is not an organic investigation that they did here. And I think a lot of us have felt that way from the beginning. And that's why we keep watching this case, because it's just not making sense, man. Okay. I will tell you, because I don't think you're shady. Thanks, Al. How I know what I know. From the source of, quote, we have to ask, did the DNA even exist? Wow. Yep. It's crazy. God, and if it goes back that far where it didn't even exist, right? So then it is, then what the hell's happened? The whole thing is completely, this turns into one of those, what the fuck is going on here, guys? She thinks that, okay, Bethany Funk is a cousin. Interesting. The judge was not against the sheath being used in the arrest warrant. He said it was evidence. He didn't care how they got the match. Yeah, I mean, I hear you, Eric. I remember hearing something like that too. And I don't believe that he's going to throw out that DNA. Like, what the defense is arguing are all like solid points. And we all kind of understand to a certain degree the nuances of all of this. But the judge, even if he understood the nuance and felt a certain way about it, he couldn't not bring it in, because I really truly believe that he knows himself that this is an appellate court issue, and that this is the kind of case that can create a new law, right? Like that's what this does, because it's so new, this area. There's no defined law for this yet. There is no privacy and Fourth Amendment privacy and protection of, quote, family members in a database. And I don't think there ever will be, to be honest, because if you make the similar argument with social media, but if somebody argues it the right way, there could be. It's really gets sticky, you know. This is why Minority Report came out, and how long ago? 20 years ago, and everyone was like, "Holy shit!" This is how they did that. Like that's where it all ends up. That's where it all leads, right? With all this information. I mean, it's crazy. I was saying this the other day to somebody, but it's true. The amount of information we have at our fingertips right now, like each and every one of us at home, these are us, we cyber sleuths, right? We're able to get more information, make more connections, dig into more things than like people who were private investigators in the 90s. Like, you know what I'm saying? And how much of us in the population are doing it? Well, there's a big population on YouTube. We're all the people that were like, well, in my second life, I wanted to be a detective, or in my second life, I wanted to be an attorney, or whatever it is, right? We're all just like, oh, hell yeah. Like we love getting into all this stuff. And we have all these tools, these OSINT tools, I like to call it, right? OSINT. And even if you don't use any of the OSINT tools to dig in further and make connections, you can just Google stuff and start making connections. It's not hard at all. Some stuff is sealed and stuff, but or harder to get to. But it's still more than like a 90s private investigator would have had, right? Like we're blowing those people away, right? It's crazy. It's crazy if you think about it. And what's funny is I don't really consider myself a nosy person, in the sense like I'm not nosy about like what my neighbors are driving and what they're doing and who's over at their house. Like I'm not that person. So this isn't nosiness that I'm looking into these families and doing this stuff. It's looking for a connection, looking for a motive. It's so deeply, do I need a motive for this? I can't tell you. Why do we have no motive for this? Cobb does a good job of filling that void with the theories he's put forth, but it hasn't. I'm not satisfied with it. I know maybe I need something more fantastical than even that. I don't know. Or maybe it just doesn't sound like the truth to me yet. I go back and forth on that all the time. I believe that he believes what he's saying is true. I just don't know if I agree with it. He has receipts for everything, but I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? What do you guys think the motive is here, regardless of who did it? What's this say? If they started with dad's DNA, a partial of nothing, and it was a text file that was changed from Authorum to FBI. Okay. So I'm trying to understand what you said here, I am Lux, because this is like interesting to me, right? It's like they did start, allegedly, they got his father's DNA from the trash. And then, okay, so then they did a partial of nothing, and it was a text file. Yeah, because they would have had to run his dad, but look, this is where my head starts to spin, okay? This is where my head starts to spin. They already had that, allegedly, they already had the snap DNA, right? Allegedly, they already have this partial snap DNA, like this ridiculously small amount of DNA. They've used some of it already so that they could run it through CODIS, right? And it doesn't give them a hit. So they have a little bit left. They think it's Bryan Kohberger because he drives a white Elantra. Is that what it is? Because they still don't have a match on the DNA, right? This partial DNA. What's happening in that time frame? Like, that's super critical. That time frame right there is super critical. Did they send that partial DNA to Othram? Is that what they did? And did Ann say Othram didn't even get anything at first? And then they sent it to the FBI? So, like, they run it through CODIS, they send it to Othram, and now it gets to the FBI. I think they even sent it to the Idaho State Police too, right? How much of this shit could possibly be left at this point? And then the FBI gets it, and they make these connections and build the rest of his own DNA out. And so then he has his dad's DNA. Here's my question. How do they know that the dad's DNA matched to this partial IgG DNA? That's like, how did that partial DNA that they got, right? How did they match those two things? I guess the DNA at Othram and FBI, what's the timing on that, right? That it was sent there. And whatever happens in the SNP file, what's the date the SNP file doubled, right? I'd really like to know the date the SNP file doubled. Because when the SNP file doubles, that's them adding to that DNA, I believe. Not positive. And now they have Bryan Kohberger's dad, who they run through CODIS, nothing, maybe something, I don't know. And then they match it to this built out DNA that they have. And they're like, okay, or they compare it to this built out DNA that they have. This is like really crazy, right? So they compare it to that. And then they're like, yeah, this has got to be the father of the victim. I know that or the father of the perpetrator. I know that they can do that. I mean, anybody's ever done a DNA test or is in any of those databases, I know, like, they can predict. They still will say maybe. They will say this person is a close relative. They could be your mother or sister or something like that, right? And so then, because they're already suspecting Bryan Kohberger, what was the reason again? Because he drives a Hyundai white Elantra. And oh yeah, the WSU cop, after weeks of leads and knowing about a white Elantra, finally decides to cross-reference a white Elantra, which happens to be, Bryan's. Which, by the way, I did one of my lost footage episodes. In the beginning, you can hear a recording of a guy who calls up the FBI tip line and basically says, this whole thing about the servers being down at the university. And at the end, he gives them a tip and says, you should try cross-checking registered vehicles to the universities and this white Elantra. That would be a good idea, right? I wonder if after that is when this fucking cop came up with the idea to do it, or it's too crazy, right? It's too crazy. He decides to finally cross-check some stuff, and then they find Bryan Kohberger's car, and then for some reason, like, they let him leave the state. I mean, I'm so confused. Where does that narrative? Like, it's starting to fall apart already. And as well as I know this case, I should know that, but I don't. Why? Because they don't give us any clear-cut guideline, any clear-cut timeline. And this is just like the Delphi case in that regard, and it's just like the Karen Reed case in that regard. And, I heard a guy talking earlier tonight, and they were talking about Delphi and what came out. And if you don't follow it, it's not going to mean a lot. But if you are following it, that, this now, I think even a third or fourth confession has come out. Ron Logan apparently told his prison guard that he's the one that killed the girls. And it was interesting because one of the guys talking about it, two of them actually were both super angry about it, right? Because they both thought that Richard Allen was guilty. And they both were trusting that like a judge or a attorney or a cop would never do something like this. even in the Delphi case. But you know what? They finally buckled after this new piece of information. It took that much, right, for them to buckle. A guy giving like a very detailed confession in jail. And now they're saying, you know what? I don't think they always thought other people were involved, but they thought Richard Allen was too. Now they're just like, I don't even think Richard Allen was there, right? And he said, and then he immediately said, and this is the part I found most interesting. He said, but I don't want people to get wrong impression, I'm not just saying that to be the guy who just has like a thing for serial killers, because that's what those people are. And it's just so interesting to me that this guy has such a bias and he has no clue. He just admitted to the bias. So he's somewhat insightful, but he still doesn't realize what he's saying. Like, he literally thinks that somebody like me, who is just asking a lot of questions and not satisfied yet to say that Bryan Kohberger is guilty, is somebody who just, quote, loves the murderers, loves the serial killers. That is the connection that this man makes in his mind, right? And that fascinates me because it's so biased. It's literally so biased. And so anybody who thinks that someone who's been charged and on trial is innocent, his immediate go-to is, oh, she just likes serial killers. She's just one of those nut jobs. So of course they're not going to ever give a chance to somebody like me to try to explain what my questions were, because if I did, they would actually be like, oh shit, actually, yeah, that is a good question. Why is it that you have to love a serial killer because you're asking questions? It's the same thing though with all these cases. If you question the family whatsoever, it's like, holy shit, like you're an evil person. Thankfully, I have never been in that position, but I imagine that if you have some horrible tragedy like this, the last thing that you're going to worry about is some people on YouTube questioning you. That's my guess, but then I don't care what people think anyway. So maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. This case is a clusterfuck. Yeah, I agree with this, right? Thanks, Robert. Yeah, this is a great point. Judges are people who can get away with really anything. I mean, that one judge did get shot by the sheriff in that little town because they were doing a little porn op or something in his back room. You guys know what case I'm talking about, right? But like, in general, judges are above it. They're above everything. And it's such a bad system. They really need to start electing all judges, not appointing judges. Judges should be elected because ultimately they form the entire culture of the city you live in, the town you live in, and that spills over and out into the rest of the states and America. And it has a huge impact. And it's, these judges, I don't care what kind of case it is. The worst ones are for family custody cases. Don't get me started. It's not a matriarchy in the family court system. Okay. There's no matriarchy existing in the family court system. I'm sorry, no patriarchy. Sorry, I'm saying that backwards. There's no patriarchy. It is a matriarchy when it comes to kids in custody. Dads lose out all the time, and it's criminal, honestly. It's criminal what they do to men in the family court systems. I think they need a different system altogether for kids and families. They should not be having these cases decided by a judge who gets a hair up his ass about something and then makes a decision that affects you and your family for the rest of your life, right? It's just insane, and that's just family systems. Then you just look at like a regular criminal, you look at a criminal trial, look at Judge Gall, look at all of the power that woman had to keep all of this evidence out, to make it not publicized. This man is now in prison. He's been found guilty. It's just, judges are the worst, honestly. They really, truly are. They have so much bias, and they have nobody to answer to. They can literally do whatever they want. They can. They can make rulings, I should say, on whatever they want. They're so entitled, and this judge, I think, is good. I do think it's good, but he is not a groundbreaking judge. You're right. It's not like the judges of the old days, where they get buildings named after them and stuff, because they actually had some integrity and balls to make a decision. They'd rather just make a bunch of crappy decisions and avoid making any waves and collect their huge paycheck. It sounds so cynical, but I mean, anybody who's been in any kind of system in the courts knows I'm right, I think. Every once in a while, you get an awesome judge, though. When you do, that's something special. Yeah. True. Precedents. Yeah. I mean, this judge could make a really huge, it's not that he's not allowed to make this decision, right? It's within his power to make this decision, but we all know that he's not going to go out and set a precedent. He's not going to go out on a limb and say something that can particularly help the defendant. Now, if it could help the state, yeah, they're always more likely to help the state, when in fact they're supposed to be impartial to both, but they're not. We know that they're not. It was funny. I was watching it and I was thinking today, I was like, it'd be really cool if they had the two parties. I literally thought this is how fucking bad I think judges are. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if they had a party where the two parties fought for and against the defendant, and then they had a third unbiased party that can sort of check them. And I'm like, holy shit, that's actually what we have. And it's called a judge, right? That's how far removed I am from thinking that any judges are actually impartial. They're all somewhat partial to the state, which is why they have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. It has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And with all this fuckery, I'm just going to say it, sorry, with surrounding this IgG and DNA and the timeline of when they got onto him, it's already, you're already at reasonable doubt. They're not explaining how they got to him still. His white car was the right year, and it was at WSU. Really, I'd have to sit down and map it out. What all came first? They're working on the DNA at some point. I have this vague recollection that somebody left it in the truck or something. One of the cops left the sheath in the truck overnight. I don't know why. This could just be a dream. That's what this case does to you. But they're working on that from the jump, trying to figure out if it matches anything. And the other unknowns, A, B, C, and D, we'll call them, processing this stuff. They don't have any suspects. They look at video camera footage and they see different cars. They don't have the cell data yet to tie to him. What do they really have in the beginning? Just the DNA that they can't find a match for. Canvassing the neighborhood, interviewing the neighbors. They have a different white car showing up at different times, and probably other cars that we don't know about. First thing we get that comes out is that I believe it's that gas station attendant You know, because everybody's doing more work than the police. The Gonzalez are finding footage. Those 2 YouTube chicks found the footage of Adam. The girl's talking about Adam, and now we got the gas station lady pouring over stuff for the police, right? And allegedly she finds that footage. Why she thought it was that specific car, that it mattered. It was going in the wrong direction, by the way. It doesn't look like, you know, his, like, that type of car whatsoever. And then somebody makes a connection to a WSU student's car and the white Elantra they're looking for. I mean, is that literally like, oh, that's right. They were, at that time, they were also getting warrants for Bryan Kohberger's telephone number. Remember? Because they had his number from a prior stop in August, which they won't show anybody that stop. Nobody can see Bryan being stopped in August. What happened? That's the one where he allegedly gives them a phone number. Does he not give them a phone number? And they just said he did? Is that another piece of the puzzle that might fall apart? I don't know. You could talk about this shit for hours. I'm not sure what this is. I'm sure I'm reading this out of context. But that sounds pretty interesting, Rollo. Girl, don't get me started. Don't get me started, girl. I remember Todd Siegel. In fact, I have a video somewhere. It might be one of the earlier lost footage ones that I did, but I called it something else. And I play some of Todd Siegel's stuff that he did with Val. And I remember he said a lot of things that ended up being true, including the sign, the astrology sign. And he may have even given a birth date for the person, and they both turned out to be true of Bryan. He said that they smelled a lot. He implied it was something like meth or something that they might have smelled like. He said the person was from a neighboring town. Like, he kept talking about neighboring town. It's fascinating. I think he's a remote viewer. I don't think he's a psychic. I think he has remote viewing capabilities. So I think he deduced Pullman. He also pulled out Pennsylvania somewhere. God only knows where. But I do remember, I don't know if you might be right, Leslie. You might have said that he doesn't think it's Bryan. It's possible. But from what I remember, he stopped going on Val's channel after a while because she just believes Bryan Kohberger is guilty and wants to talk about all the astrology signs to point to it. But he was not really going along with that. And I feel like he was saying it was more than one person. I didn't know that he actually said it wasn't Bryan. But again, I don't remember at all. That's just what vague recollection of it. Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what that guy was saying that I played the clip, and I agree. This is a future United States Supreme Court argument. It can make, yes, 100%. I agree with this one. Yeah. I wonder what other movies are going to start seeming like reality soon, and we're just going to be like, yeah, whatever. The aliens were exposed. Orbs are turning into aircraft all around my house. You know, it's kind of like, whatever, you know, what else is happening? California is gone. You know, it was burnt down. Los Angeles. Right? I mean, what else could they throw at us? I don't think anybody cares anymore. Isn't it funny? Like, when they finally start disclosing all this stuff about aliens, people don't even talk about it because they literally don't. Nobody has a fuck to give because we've just been barraged with the craziest shit day in and day out since 2016. Since 2016, the world has not slowed down. And it's just getting faster and faster and faster. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Black Mirror is the one that scares me the most. I'll be honest. The thing that scares me the most that I hope never happens in the future are those scary ass robot dogs they have. Okay. Those robot dogs are terrifying. Guys, I don't want robot dogs to be sent after me for any reason whatsoever. Okay. I mean, holy shit, they're scary. Have you guys seen those things? Me neither. Me neither. Spicy chicken nuggets. Me neither. I agree with you. But most juries love the DNA. They don't want to, they don't care. They don't have time for touch and IgG and STR and SNPs, and they don't have time for that. They don't have time for, you don't know how it got there, right? They don't have time for that. No, it's DNA. It's there. It's there. He did it. Just like I have questions. You love murderers. You love serial killers. It's that mindset, right? Like, I don't want to make any more synapses connect in my brain than I need to. Okay. So just show me the touch DNA. All right. And we're good. I'm done here. Right. Like, let's not exercise our critical thinking skills whatsoever, guys. No, the brain, you don't need the brain. No. Let's set that down over here. Okay. You just let your little brain sit down over there. Okay. DNA, conviction. All right, we're good. Okay. Now you can take your brain back and put it in. I mean, seriously. Seriously. And what about the interview with Bryan Kohberger? Does that piss anybody else off? When did they do this interview? When? I know Thompson says there was no interrogation. There was no interview. He said it today or yesterday. I'm sorry. And I showed you a little clip of him saying it. But then right after it, I found that clip I was looking for from Peter from like a year ago or more, where he reads from a court document that Bryan Kohberger was interviewed at Moscow Police Department by Detective Payne. So when was that interview? And it's so crazy because Anne mentioned something about Bryan wasn't even on their radar. So again, it goes back to, when did he get on their radar? When did they interview him? It was in a court document, and lawyer, is a bona fide lawyer, and he read it. So I'm assuming this is a fucking fact, right? Maybe there's a reasonable explanation I'm not thinking of. Can anybody figure it out? Yeah, I know that book actually. I have the PDF of that book. I agree. But it turns out that the FBI, or maybe it was Othram or somebody, doesn't even have protocols. They don't even have protocols. I agree with you 100%. Well, and when they don't follow, and that's like, honestly, I think what a lot of criminal defense work is just attacking people that are not competent in their jobs to create reasonable doubt. And a lot of times it's tedious because there aren't all these, it's just not the same in every case. But in this case, you would think, and they should do it in every case, but you have a case like this that's like internationally known. Can you just follow the fucking procedures, guys? Can you just do it this one time? I know you don't usually do it. I know you just want to get to Mickey D's and get your like coffee and burger or whatever. I get it. I understand you don't want to exert yourself. But for this case, just this one case, can you follow the procedures and the policies that are in the guidebook for us? Can we do that, guys? Just for this one, because it will be heavily scrutinized by the entire fucking world. But nope, they couldn't do it. Nope, they just said, nope, we're not doing it. We don't feel like it today. We're just going to do what we do all the time. Right? I mean, is that what's happening here? And if it is, how screwed up is that? So if they do it in this case, they're definitely doing it in every other case. If they do it in this case, they're doing it everywhere because they're so comfortable with it. They've been doing bad things for so long that they don't even try to hide it anymore. They make it obvious. We all suspect them of doing all these bad things for so long. And now we're being proven right. And yet, still, it's just like watching it. We're just watching it. Like, at what point does the frog jump out of the boiling water? At what point? And then what happens? This is how I know it's time to go. I'm getting very philosophical here, guys, and I'm way off track. And I thank you all so much for listening to me. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with a certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe. I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way. Changed, man, all your music and arrangement. You don't know shit, shut your mouth, you can save it. I'm the same dude that got his come up from the basement. 100 songs, 100 weeks, didn't change it. Experiments, development, intelligence, and patience. I'll do it all again, cause I never feel complacent. Let's keep the good vibes, positivity's contagious. I'm never looking back, cause I made a life that's passionate. A college graduate suppressing all his talents, yeah. He found a way to go and change, become an advocate. For taking control of your life, go out and battle. And you think you have a dream, then act on it, get after it. Get out your head and fucking capture it. You got one life to master it. Don't give up on your future. We all start losers. We're all late bloomers. Gotta struggle through the sewer. What you say? Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks. I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks. I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way.
Thanks, guys. Good night. See you soon.